If you're on the fence, you don't want to hesitate. Do it. Join us. It's going to be awesome. roadtripdads.com, and we hope to see you in the mountains this fall.
Welcome to the Honestly Adoption Podcast, a show about adoption, foster care, advocacy, and becoming the best caregiver possible. Pull up a chair. We're glad you've joined us. Here's your host, Mike Berry.
Friends, family, folks far and wide, welcome to the Honestly Adoption Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Mike Berry, and I'm your host for this show, oftentimes, most of the time, joined by my fabulous co-host, Kristin Berry. But I'm running solo for this episode, and I'm going to tell you why here in just a moment. But before we get to that, I want to welcome you to the show. If this is your first time checking out Honestly Adoption, welcome to you. We're so glad you're here. Make sure you jump over to our podcast website, honestlyadoption.com/podcast. Check out past episodes, everything we do with the Honestly Adoption Company, as well as subscribe to this show. We would love for you guys to do that. We got so many great resources for you, all geared to helping you become the best parent possible. And I also want to tell you this. If you are familiar with this show, you've heard me talking about this, you've heard us talking about this, but if not, I want to tell you about this. Speaking of helping you become the best caregiver, best parent possible, we are really excited to host a one-day training event completely online next month on October 19th called Insight One Day Training. Now, you may be familiar with the Insight Virtual Conference. The Insight One Day Training is part of that family, part of the Insight family, but we are excited to welcome highly sought-after therapist Jessica Sinarski, as well as psychologist Dr. Laura Anderson, to hang out with us for an entire day. And guys, we're going to be diving into the science behind, the brain science behind trauma, the impact it has on the brain, disrupted attachment, and then most importantly, talking about healing. We're going to spend an entire day talking about the science behind trauma, disrupted attachment, and healing. And guys, listen, the great part about this, tickets to Insight One Day Training are only $29.95 for general admission, $49.95 if you are a professional in need of continuing education, and then of course if you want lifetime access to the content, $59.95. It's open now. honestlyadoption.com/one day. You can save your spot. You guys, tickets are going fast to this. To become a popular event, we're filling it up fast, so don't wait to join this event. honestlyadoption.com/one day. Get your ticket for Insight One Day Training. Now, here's why I'm running solo for this episode. Kristin's not joining me for this particular episode because I am excited for you guys to hear an interview I did not that long ago with my two good friends, Andrew Schneidler and Jason Morriss. The three of us together several years ago created an event every fall that happens every fall called Road Trip, and it is a mountaintop experience created for foster and adoptive dads. That's right. For a week, over a week, we run 2 different sessions of Road Trip. We invite guys up into the mountain, and guys, here's what we do. We just spend time together just hanging out, really. That's really what we do, but we also dive deep into conversations that relate to our particular journey as foster adoptive dads. It is an amazing experience. We're going to be hosting this in just a couple of weeks, October 3rd through the 6th and then 6th through the 9th, but I wanted to air this interview with my two good friends so you can get a glimpse into what Road Trip's all about, the heart behind it, why we started it, and most importantly, how you, if you're a foster or adoptive dad, or you, a spouse who's listening to this, who is married to a foster and adoptive dad, how you can get a spot to the 2021 event happening in just a couple of weeks. Listen to this interview. Guys, you're going to be inspired. I love every chance I get to talk to these guys. I love these guys. We walk together. We are a band of brothers. Check out this interview. Hey, Andrew and Jason, welcome to the Honestly Adoption Podcast.
Hey, man. It's great to be back.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Andrew. Good to hear you guys' voice.
Yeah,
Likewise.
It's so good to have you guys. And I've got Andrew. Those of you that are watching on YouTube right now, you see Andrew's beautiful face, and Jason's joining us via phone. But man, you guys, we've created something special here with Road Trip.
I agree. we find ourselves just about the opposite end of the calendar. So this is about as far away from either having been or going to road trip as I want to be. I'm ready for October. I don't know about you guys.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm ready. And we've got guys signing up right now, and it's awesome. And they're saying the same things. If you guys, and those of you that are listening, we actually create a special private Facebook group just for guys who have attended. But Andrew and Jason, if you guys have been watching the Facebook group, there's guys already saying that very thing that you just said, Jason, like, when is October going to get here? And
exactly.
Let's start there. I want to just jump into road trip. We've had you guys on past episodes. Actually, let me do this first. Before we jump into that first question I had, I want to have you guys tell a little bit about yourselves, because this may be the first time that people are hearing or listening to this, hearing you guys. So, Jason, go first. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, right now I'm upside down trying to reconnect an ignition solenoid coil on my 69 Triumph motorcycle. And that's the most important thing you need to know about me, is that I ride old British motorcycles, and it bogged down on the way to work and died in traffic. And so my commitment to the world is to go through it on an old antique British motorcycle, which means I generally don't get where I need to be. In addition to that, I have my wife and I have been married 25 years. I've got 5 daughters that range from 22 all the way down to 12. They're a delightful sort of in the process of deconstructing Methodist church here in downtown Austin. It's a dream job. I've been at it for almost 7 years, and love to read, love to run, love to ride motorcycles. That's me.
I love it. And you can't see us laughing, but Andrew and I were laughing as we were picturing you stalled out on the side of the road.
Yeah, you bunch of jerks.
I know.
Yeah, you'd be the last people I'd call to come help me out. I have real friends. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, not to mention the fact that we're like 2,000 miles away from each other, but, still.
In Jason's phone next to my name, it says, okay, if you're really screwed, call this guy.
Right. Well, what you need to know, which is also important, is that when I ride my antique bike, I ride it with a pair of custom designed John Fuvog boots. So Google that, y'all.
Of course he does. So my name's Andrew. I'm looking at myself in the camera, and I was clearing brush a couple days ago. This is why you should always wear eye protection. I tripped and fell into a brush pile. I'm an adoptive dad of 3 kids. Private adoption is my oldest, and 2 kids adopted out of foster care. I am in this with the thick of it with the rest of the dads. When I left for work this morning, my wife's like, have fun at work. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'll come back. And then I left. Obviously I was mostly joking, but no, I have a heart for dads, especially, besides the fact that I am one, but just honestly from the years of working with foster and adoptive families, I'm an adoptive attorney also, adoptions attorney also. Invariably, when I've been talking with people, when we talk about the stuff that's hard and the challenges, it invariably involves the dads in some way. Not to say that it's their fault per se, but we dads are part of the equation. And so we need to deal with our stuff, and we need each other. And so that's why Road Trip was started.
Yeah, and man, as we were just talking about, Road Trip it's kind of like a I wouldn't say like a fever, but it kind of is a fever. And Andrew's saying he can't hear me. I don't know what to do, man. You cannot hear a thing I'm saying. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. I've looked at all the sound settings on my end, and I'm good. Morris, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I hear both of you loud and clear. I don't hear any interruption at all. I wonder if it's his earpod.
Now I can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Did you click something?
By my own mute. Are we on the air right now?
Well, we're recording this, but I'm leaving all this in, man. I want the raw, organic.
I think it has to do when I mute. I'll shut up. I think it has to do when I'm muting or unmuting. Keep talking, Mike.
Yeah. Okay, so what I was saying, and you can hear me now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So ignore the text I just sent you. Let's put it that way.
You know what? Here's one. Ignore all the texts we ever send each other. Y'all, if we were brought up on charges based on the texts we've sent, we'd all be so
guilty, Your Honor.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
right.
Your
It'd be
Honor.
like, hey, Your Honor, can you have like 3 guys to a cell?
Move to strike, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So anyways, I knew this. I was excited for this conversation because I knew it was going to go off the rails quickly. So this is just the beginning, y'all. So, okay. So we were talking earlier about how, Morris, you said that, listen, guys are, you can't wait for October to get here. The 3 of us have all said that, like, October is where it's at. I just made mention today through an Instagram story that the highlight of my year is road trip. And we have a lot of guys in the private Facebook group that say the same thing. Like, I just can't wait for October. And when's it going to get here? So I want to start right there. Like, it's kind of like a fever. And for people listening that may not understand, what this is all about, and maybe even saying like, what in the world is road trip? Let's talk about that. Like, why is it that October has become so monumental for the 3 of us, but also for the guys who attend road trip or who have attended road trip?
I have some speculation as to why it's transformational for others, but I can speak for myself, and then y'all can extrapolate. It's the only gathering that I do in a year where I have to do absolutely no work to filter or pre-qualify. We just show up and we speak truth. One of the original ideas that we had a long time ago when we sort of conceived of this, going back about 5 years now, was that it would need to be a space where no one would have to filter. No one would have to protect anyone. No one would have to speak softly if they felt like yelling and screaming. And the reality is we set the stage for that, and it happens every single time. First time we ever rolled up the mountain in a rental car and listened to a Journey Best Of track, I'm thinking to myself, we have just blown it. Guys don't do vulnerable. Guys don't do honest. I've read the social science numbers. I also know that's not true, that's misleading. But rolling up the mountain with a bunch of guys trying to get honest and vulnerable seems like a dream, and it happened the very first time. And here's how I opened that first one. And this will just, if you're listening and you've never been and you're interested, get ready. I'm not going to lie to you. Truth in advertising. This is what we do. Very first thing that came out of my mouth was, my name is Jason. I'll tell you more about me. Before I do that, turn to the guy next to you and talk about the one thing you promised you would not confess to anyone about your parenting. Go. And it all happened. Everything just lit on fire right there. It took about 17 seconds, and the whole thing went up like matches and fumes. And here's why October is life-changing. And my dream would be someday our adopted kids could get together, and they would say, what is it about October that Dad always seems refreshed and renewed and came back with new vision?
Yeah.
Yep.
We find each other. We shoulder each other's loads. Every single story has a unique kind of brokenness. Every single one of us is struggling to do self-care. Every single one of us is struggling and working and trying our best to stay relationally engaged with our wives. Every single one of us is managing the gap between what we thought this would be and what it actually ended up to be. There's beauty in this, but there's a space in October where we get to be honest and we get to let our guard down and we get to say, I can't do this alone. And we get to look around the room and realize we don't have to. We just don't have to. And so that's what October is for me. It's a time to find a few extra shoulders to help carry the load I have. It's a time to challenge us to go deep inside to do the work it takes to do the work of adoption and fostering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I think you nailed it, Jason. The only things I would add to it for me, I think of vulnerability. So if a guy's listening to this, if their wife made him listen to it, they're probably like, oh crap, here we go, But honestly,
that's how we get most of the guys up the mountain right there.
So I'm almost 50, been married 27 years. I think vulnerability and authenticity is like a thirst. And we can tell us that we're not thirsty, and we can even go a long time without drinking. And maybe we even don't feel thirsty, but the fact doesn't change that our body needs it. Our body is designed for it. Our body, frankly, can't go on without it. And so to try to, and I don't know, I realize your audience is from a broad spectrum. I'm a Christian. In the quote unquote evangelical Christian world, I think that's almost the worst for the men, because it's like, oh no, you're not a good Christian unless you do these things. Or if you do these things, then you're not a good Christian.
Yeah.
And all that, honestly, is exhausting, and it it doesn't work, pardon me. But what we really need in on this journey, or we need the Aaron and the hers, where we've got one another, where it's a symbol, but it's also a literal truth, where we've got each other that can say, hey, keep going, you're going to make it. And so it's, I can't, there's too many guys, too many emails to count that people have said that's life-changing. That is the life-changing.
Yeah. I think what I would add to this is there's something about safe space. You ask any guy on the street, or you ask any guy that we know, even a guy that we know we're friends with, anything about safe space, and they may deny it, like, I'm good. I don't really need that kind of a connection or community, but we all crave that. And, one of the things that we have recognized the last couple of years with Road Trip is that we have a lot of guys. First of all, we see this. Guys see this journey, foster care adoption. We see it very differently from our spouses. We see it very differently. We experience it very differently. And, the default of men is to go internal, is to isolate, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, suck it up. That's unfortunately, that was the culture we were raised in. Our generation was, we had fathers, we had adult men look at us and say, suck it up, rub some dirt on it, stop your whining, stop your crying.
If you need someone else, that's a sign of weakness.
Yes. And so this idea of safe space, what's one of the first things we say when guys get up the mountain, when they join us that very first night for both sessions, we will look at them and say, this is safe space for you to be open, honest, vulnerable, without fear of judgment, without fear of criticism, because that's something that we fear. We fear that our openness, that our vulnerability will lead to criticism, because we've all been in that position where we've been criticized. So I think what makes it unique is that safe space. Jason, go ahead. What were you going to say?
And you can encourage safe space, and it may or may not happen. But I think the thread that we've worked on, and it's been constant for all 4 years, is that we lead into vulnerability. We go there first. And the way a space is safe is not before someone shares the truth. It's what happens after they share the truth. And that immediate moment after, when no one recoils in judgment, no one jumps down the throat, no one quotes, crappy text at each other. None of that is the point. And so the moments immediately after someone revealing the truth and the content of their heart and their mind and where they're at, those are sacred moments. Those are the most sacred of all. And, I could go on with examples of how that works, but we lead that way. So part of my dread building up to October is that I know I can't take people where I'm not willing to go, and then I gotta go there first. In fact, I think that's the definition of leadership: is people who are willing to take a risk and people who are willing to do that first. So that's what we've done, and it's been enormously rewarding. It's been life changing.
Yeah, it really has. Now here, I want to stir it up a little bit, maybe play, for lack of a better term, the devil's advocate here. You may have some people listening in and they're thinking, gosh, another men's retreat? I mean, my church offers a men's retreat. I went to the men's retreat. It was not the most fun experience I had, or I've been to these. I don't need to go to this again. So let's talk about why this is unique, why this is not your run-of-the-mill men's retreat, and the fact that we intentionally have carved it out like that. So, Andrew, or any of you guys, either one of you guys, let's talk. I want to stir this up a little bit.
I'll say some stuff here, and I hope I don't piss some people off.
No, go for it. We need to.
But so yeah, that's actually what I said before this. It's like, I have been to men's retreats, and I have, and those things suck most of the time, guys. I mean, usually they're put on by people who either are all about behavior control and behavior modification, or, don't get me wrong, but oftentimes the care ministry of some churches is put on by women. And so we have people saying, hey, it'd be great if we had this chance for the guys to get away. Okay, it's all planned. All you have to do is go now. And the guys just show up because they don't want to do any work. And all that stuff's crap. And pardon me. But I am going to get people pissed off at me. My email is, no, I'm just kidding.
No, let me say this though. The reason I just said that's okay is because here's going back to what we just said, and I don't want you to lose your thought, but this just jumped in my mind. But going back to what we were just talking about, and I think Jason, you said it, where you think it's safe space and you enter into safe space, and then all of a sudden you've got those people who are recoiling, right? And we've fiercely guarded against that with Road Trip, but I've been in those situations where I'm like, oh, this is safe space and I can be vulnerable. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I've got a guy pulling me aside who says, hey, let's talk about this. And
maybe you are too safe.
Yeah. Yeah. But
you're a little less safe, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, we really want to be real and open here, but wow, you're
Can you temper your authenticity, please.
Exactly.
So,
continue.
So, here's the things that when people try to do things well, but in my opinion, fall short on men's retreat, is we try too much, frankly. We say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Answer these 5 questions. Turn and answer these 5 questions. Then we'll do that from 10:20 to 10:35. And then from this, the whole entire thing's programmed out. And it's like, this is a formula. And this is the way that every single guy that comes here is going to walk their way to a better marriage, walk their way to anger management, everything's formulaic. That is not the way human beings operate. And that's not the way men operate. We are complex. We are diverse. There is no one size fits all. So what we try to do at Road Trip, I remember my wife, she looked at the schedule for the first year we did it, and the entire schedule for 3-4 days fit on one side of one 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And Michelle goes, that's all you're doing? People are going to want their money back. And I was like, oh crap, thinking
I'm glad you didn't share that story with me back in the day.
Yes, right. So I shared that story at the end of that session that we're heading to. People are saying, are you kidding? If I knew I had to pay $320 or whatever to get this time up in the mountains to do this, I would sign up every single time. And so what we do is we tee up situations where challenging and healthy conversations, experience that will cause guys to get to know each other better or grow closer to each other. These things are likely to occur. You don't go and you say, no, I'm going to make it occur. But here's an example. So guys bond, if you will, connect through shared experience. Something as simple as father and son playing catch. You say, oh, they're just being silly. No. That activity, or helping someone with their car or their starter solenoid on a British motorcycle on the side of the road. So what we do is we say, let's create situations where guys go on sunrise hikes in the morning. Let's have a bonfire every night. We're sitting around poking the fire and talking. Let's go down to the brew pubs in the afternoon. Let's drive up the Pikes Peak. Let's climb this insane amount of stairs called the Manitou Incline. But all these different things, there are things that we can do shoulder to shoulder and together. And you say, oh, we're doing this to get to the top of the mountain. Well, yes, but actually the most valuable and the most beautiful thing that comes out of this isn't the view from the top of the mountain, but it's the conversations that happen up and back.
Yeah.
My brain just made a connection while you were talking, Andrew. If we scheduled a retreat for men with a bunch of things to do, then we're sending the signal that the difference between where you are and where you can be is more action.
Yeah.
I think the message I've been on for 4 years is that it's not more to do, it's more things to release.
I can't hear him now.
In fact, I think the gospel is less about doing and more about releasing. That's the gospel that's saving my soul these days. That's my day job. And so if we filled up the schedule and said, you got all this stuff to do to be refreshed, really good news. Good news is you can carry this differently. Release, you can let this go. You can take this in a different way. That's, to me, that's why we keep it as uncomfortable as possible. I don't need another conference. Guys, we can email resources around. This is not about resourcing. Don't confuse this for a place to come get resources. The resource you get here is brotherhood and safety and vulnerability. And my suggestion is that's the real transformative stuff. Anybody can do a Google search on what to do next in a particular situation. What we don't get, safe space to just unfold. And I think
Absolutely.
that's 100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
And, we have had guys, let's see, guys, what have we done? We've done since 2016, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. This is our 5th year coming up. And our, 8th, 9th session that we're about to lead here in October. Right. And not once we've had more than 500 guys or 400 guys attend a road trip from 2016 till present day. And our team has yet to receive the feedback or an email that says, gosh, you need to have more things on the schedule. I need to have, nobody's asked for breakout sessions. Nobody's asked for, workshops on this, and this. In fact, they've said the opposite. They've said, exactly. Thank you. I needed to rest. I needed to rest. I needed to go down to the pipe and cigar shop or the microbreweries or on a hike with other guys and just be. For crying out loud, just be. Because we're in a fast-paced world that inundates us with information all the time. We are trying to process. We are trying to download all of this information, not to mention everything that we have going on at home. We need a departure from that. We need to depart from that and just be. And that's exactly what Road Trip offers. A very wide open schedule to be. And
what's cool, what's one of my favorite things is, so when I was a little kid, I'm going to tell a story first, but when I was a little kid, we found an old tire and we thought it would be really fun to roll it down our driveway and thought, well, okay, if it gets going too fast, we'll just knock it over. And as we got going, of course, it did start getting too fast. We were running and we tried to knock it over, but the gyroscope was so strong, the wheel just righted itself and it kept going. And then pretty soon it was going faster than we can run. And went all the way down the driveway and went up the front porch and slammed into our neighbor's house, and I got in trouble for it. But the moral of the story is what happens when something starts rolling and gaining momentum, and that gyroscope effect. And the same thing happens every year where I'll be sitting in the back. All of our talks happen around these gigantic long tables where they seat 40 people each, and we're sitting around, at the end of a meal. And I'll be sitting in the back just watching and listening. And, Jason will be sharing, and then there'll be a time when Jason's not sharing, and all of a sudden a guy's asking about something, and another person next to him starts ministering to them. And it's pretty soon it's holy ground. There's a particular time, a previous year, where someone was talking about financial hardships, and they didn't ask for anything. They were basically just saying, this is what's going on, this is on my mind. And I guarantee you, every man who's in a family thinks about finances, pressures around finances. And all of a sudden a guy gets up and walks over towards this person and puts down, I don't know what it was, but some amount of money next to him. And the guy looks at it and his face clouds over and he starts crying. And another person, and then all of a sudden another and another. Jason didn't say a peep about this. Mike didn't either. I didn't say. We just sat back and looked, and it was this, and the guy sat and cried. It was this beautiful moment where that was the tire going faster and faster. Yeah. Now my analogy is going to break down because it didn't slam into a house, but
yeah, but every guy in the room though started thinking, man, I wish I would have been the one to say something about my finances.
I think someone after that goes, I'm also having financial.
Yeah, hey, what about me?
Right. No, I like that analogy though. I have a different example in mind. I'll be straight with you that the first year I did this very reluctantly. I have a full-time job.
Yeah, and you were cutting in and out a little bit, Morris. I think it's just because of the phone effect and how we're recording this. But one of the things that you talked about was this last year when we were all there. You recognized the need for that and needing to be there. And I can say that I can speak for all three of us and say, all three of us collectively, 2019 was a year from hell. It was ridiculous. It was hellish for all three of us for different reasons. And we all three at times thought, I don't know if I can pull this off. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if I can make it up the mountain this year, but we did. And, we poured everything we had into Road Trip, but we also took intentional time to care for ourselves, to self-care. And as we drove down from the mountain at the end of the week, at the end of the second session, we all three made the comment that I feel completely at peace and I needed to be up this mountain. And I think the guys that attend feel the same thing. Some of them may reluctantly come up the mountain, but we've never had a guy leave the mountain and say, I wish I wouldn't have come. And that includes the three of us. There's just something that's special that happens up there that is healing for our souls as guys. And we need that. Andrew, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I would just say, if you're listening to this and you're looking for going to an event where, some authority figure has all the answers and will tell you exactly what to do,
it's not road
this
trip.
is not it.
Yeah.
We are in it completely. I think part of the reasons why it resonates so much with other guys and with each other is truly we are on this road trip together. You think of what a road trip is. It's being in the car, shoulder to shoulder. It's if the car breaks down, you break down together. If you get pulled over by a cop, you're pulled over together. You celebrate the highs and the lows together.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be just totally honest. The last year, Mike's right. Last 18 months was awful. And so on the way up the mountain, Mike and Jason, they looked at me and they said, you know what, this first session, you need to be filled up. And so just be a dad. And I took them up on it. And it was, to this day, some of the most profound moments I had with other men, but then frankly, as a Christian, spiritually, times with Jesus where it sounds goofy, but I just went for a hike and I was next to a mountain stream and there's not a road or a car or a person in sight. And I sat there in the sun, listening to the wind through the pines. And I wanted to pray, but I was honestly didn't even have it in me to pray. And so I was like, Lord, I don't even have the words, but I just want to be. And it was the closest thing I can describe is it felt like a giant hug. And it's probably, people are probably laughing at me right now, but it was the most, like I said, I'm almost 50. It was the most spiritually profound moment I've ever had in my life. And that came because Mike and Jason were like, hey, listen, just be there and be a dad. And so we give each other permission to be dads just like everybody else. And so I think of us more as facilitators, certainly not the experts, but I think that helps because this world, men are suffering in this world, not for lack of experts, but for lack of connection to each other.
Yeah. Those are good words. And man, I will tell you that we say that unapologetically, like we don't have all the answers and we're not going to try to fix your problems up here. And we do that because we know we can't. We know the best thing that we can do up on that mountain is care for one another, connect with one another, and let each other know that I've got you. I've got your back. I'm right in this with you. Now, let's real quick, because you may have some people that are like, okay, I'm grasping the philosophy behind this and the why, but what do you actually do at Road Trip? Do y'all just sit around and talk, or what else? So let's talk about that.
That sounds fun, doesn't it? All of a sudden.
Yeah.
No. What we do is we meet up for breakfast around one big massive table. Obviously, the imagery there is that most growth and formation actually happens at a table. I don't know how we got so program-based in our faith that we think everything happens when we're listening to some white guy talk. But actually, spiritual growth happens around a table, and that's the biblical paradigm. So we start the day around the table. We'll all have breakfast, and then we'll push our dishes aside gently, and I'll initiate some conversation, some content. We'll have some dialogue. There's no worship leading. There's no lots and lots of, there's no real corporate-led prayer. There's plenty of prayer that happens in its own way. But it's not churchy at all. It's a conversation. It's provocative. It's designed to go right to some deep questions as opposed to uniform answers. And then we dismiss. And then the rest of the day, it's up to the participant to decide, do they want to nap? Do they want to hike? Do they want to go biking? Do they want to go fishing? Do they want to go horseback riding? Do they want to, go down to the breweries? And then we meet back up for dinner. Obviously, there's lunch served for those who are still on the campus. And we meet back up for dinner. We wrap up the theme that we initiated that day. And so it's as simple as that. That's what we do. We break out into rooms, and you convene for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And there's no other content other than that. And I think that's part of the reason why it's transformative, because we just kind of let it happen. We give it enough space to let it happen.
Yeah. And you can actually jump over, and we'll make mention of this in the show notes and also at the end, but you can actually, if you're listening to this, and you can open up another tab on your computer or on your phone, jump over to roadtripdads.com, and you can see that full schedule that Jason was just walking you through. But that was a really, really perfectly concise way to a snapshot of the day. Well done.
Yeah, we try to give the guys permission to do what they need or to achieve what they need. And that includes sleeping through the first, the breakfast if you want, or taking a nap, or, again, we go through our day constantly following orders or giving orders. And in my opinion, rarely do we listen to ourselves, to our heart, our spirit. Rarely do we actually check the engine, even though the check engine light's been on for years. Mm-hmm. And so we try to do this in a way where it's non-threatening. It's we're not going to be guilting or pushing anybody into anything. One thing I will say about the morning sessions, which I love, and maybe I'm just a nerd, but so I practice law, and going through law school, they teach in a method called the Socratic method, which is you basically just continue to ask questions, and whatever the student answers, you go, but what about this? And so then that's another question. And so the student is grappling with these things, and the tendency at first when you're a new law student is you just want the answer to the question. You just get me to the end. What's the answer? Because that's nice and bite-sized and simple. But frankly, where the real work happens and where the real learning happens is it's not so much about the answer. It's about answering, or about asking yourself these question after question after question, and following that rabbit hole. And Jason does a fantastic job at that, where he'll just fire up a few questions. And it doesn't go very long, just a few minutes, but then those questions stay on our minds when we're hiking during the day, when you're fly fishing, when you're, whatever. And it really works. Yeah. Yeah.
The only thing I would add to that would be, I guess in law school, they teach you that the Socratic method is to ask questions. Well, in divinity school, they teach us that the Socratic method is to leverage the collective awareness towards group discovery. So if someone asks a question, you leverage what just happened in the room for further discovery for the question asker as well as those who are consuming it. So I love what you're saying, Andrew, and that really is, I had to say, what is the skill that makes it work? It's the skill to be able to keep the plate spinning, and it's the ability to keep the room safe, and to, when needed, run in and rescue because it has happened once maybe, where it felt like an answer was trite and was not fully listening to the spirit of the question. And so we are diligent about that. That's the heavy work right there.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we listen to, you said we listen to our heart, we listen to our spirit. You know what else we do? We listen to our bodies. Us guys are so disassociated with our bodies. We can't even read the data anymore. Most of us run so constantly in the fatigue space that we know if we raced our engine in the red on the tachometer, we know what happens. You start blowing seals and gaskets, and you start blowing hose lines. This is our constant reality. And so that's the other thing that we give permission to do. Last year, we called it self-care, which doesn't sound like a subject men would appreciate. I'm just going to warn you. Here's a little telescope, a tidbit for where we're going next year. Just beyond self-care is another concept called self-compassion. And so here's how it works. Self-care says, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to meet my needs. Self-compassion says, I'm going to name my suffering. Now, I'm not going to compare it to the suffering of the guy next to me. Of course, who's got it worse? We can always find those examples. I'm not going to say, well, it's better than it used to be. I'm not going to say we don't have it as bad as others. All of that crap does nothing but make us feel smaller. Self-compassion says my suffering is legit and I'm going to name it. And I'm not going to rush on to fix it. I'm going to name it. When you name suffering for yourself or for others, what gets activated deep down inside is compassion.
What you're saying is spot on.
Yeah.
And I will say, honestly, when I first met Jason, he came up to me. I was leading a camp for foster and adoptive parents, and he gave me some feedback, and it was, hey, can I give you a piece of advice? I said, sure. Less teaching, more story. I mean, what is that? Less teaching, 4 words. It took me a while to count that. But anyway, truly, Jason has a gift of, he's a sniper of the truth. And then what I mean by that is he has an ability to hit the truth through over thousands of meters of crap, poo-poo.
It's all staying on the show, boys.
And he'll
stay here.
And it will, and so the stuff he talks about is spot on. And so I'm looking forward to, Jason, I really do appreciate it. I'm reading Rising Strong by Brene Brown. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more on that.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me
I
right
can
now?
hear you.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're back. Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm gonna sit right here. I'm not gonna move. So last year we talked about self-care, right? The act and the art of kind of taking care of yourself and meeting your needs, kind of naming what those needs are. This year, I want to bring some content around the work of Kristin Neff. Kristin Neff is a similar academic to Brene Brown, but she's here at UT. Brene Brown's at the University of Houston, over a few hours east of here. But Kristin Neff articulates something called self-compassion, and here's the difference. Self-care says I can take care of myself when I'm aware of needs. Self-compassion goes underneath that. It comes first. That is the ability to name your suffering. And here's what that means. Most of us get in space with other adoptive dads and we compare ourselves to them and we say, well, I don't have it as bad as them. Therefore, I'm not allowed to ache and bleed and be really disappointed. Self-compassion says, no, first you name your suffering. Because when you name suffering, when you do this for someone else, your wife or your kids or a friend, immediately when you name it, compassion begins to flow. So when we name our suffering, not comparing it, not saying it's better than it used to be or it could be worse, when we name it, our disappointment, our suffering, then we begin to meet our own needs of compassion. That's a game changer for me this year. I could, for a million reasons, tell you how it's saving my bacon as a pastor in ministry, but even as a dad, I think that's the next level. So that's a tease for where we're going in the fall.
I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's perfect. I think this is a needed next step, and I'm intrigued just listening to you, and I'm going to be there. So I think that's a needed next step, and that's going to be hugely valuable for guys. So this has been a great discussion, guys, and I will tell everybody who's listening, we just opened up registration about 4 days ago, and we are already over half full for both sessions. We have 2 sessions back to back, and we're taking registrations like crazy. We filled up in a month last year. 1 month, we filled up 80 spots in both, and we are on pace to do that, maybe even less than that. So, if you're listening, and this podcast audience is a fairly large audience, pretty big audience. So if you're listening and you're like, I need to be there, or you're listening and you're like, my guy needs to be there, jump over to roadtripdads.com, save your spot. You don't want to miss this. It's truly a remarkable experience. That's really what it is. It's an experience. It's not an event. It's not a conference. That's one of the things we agreed on, fellas, back in the day when we first set sail to plan this thing, that we did not want a conference. We did not want a retreat. We didn't want anything along those lines that resembled that. We needed to be unique, to target a unique need. And so that's what it's all about. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you're listening to this, dads and men, humans are diverse. Yeah. If we ever try to say, okay, all humans are this or all humans are that, you're going to be incredibly inaccurate, and you'll also hurt people. Same is true with dads. And frankly, the same, you could go into any subset. Same is true with Christians, same is true as, whatever. So what we do at Road Trip, the foundation is, these are dads who are caring for kids, period. And we want to be the best versions of dads caring for kids. And we recognize it's like the oxygen mask dropping from the airplane. If we're not around to help our kids, either literally, physically, or emotionally, then we're not going to be helping our kids. But this is something, if you're thinking, well, this is only for Christians. No, it's not. There are Christians who attend there, but there also are not. Do I have to be married? Do I have to be straight? If you are listening to this and your heart says, I resonate with what they're saying, this is for you. We want you there. If you're thinking, I only want to go to this if people fit my voting record or this is not for you. This is for people who are caring for kids and for dads. And so we want you there. We want to love on you. And frankly, we need you to love on us. And so we hope you'll join us.
Well, listen, Andrew, Jason, I love you guys. I love our partnership. I love our friendship and our brotherhood. You guys mean the world to me. And I couldn't imagine life without you guys. And I couldn't imagine life without Road Trip.
Me neither. Yeah, I agree.
Same. I agree.
Yeah, thanks for being on this call, guys. And again, I will tell everybody listening, roadtripdads.com, jump over there, check it out. You can learn more about Road Trip. We actually have a video trailer there that gives you kind of a actual visual inside peek into what road trip looks like. There's clips of myself and Andrew sharing, but then also Jason teaching and the guys just spending time with one another. So that's over at roadtripdads.com. And I will say, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Honestly Adoption Podcast. Guys, I hope you have enjoyed this amazing interview with my two good friends, Jason and Andrew. And if you're curious how to get a spot for Road Trip 2021, it's simple. Jump over to roadtripdads.com and you can save your spot there. But I have to tell you, Road Trip's coming up in just a couple of weeks. So if you're thinking about it, if you're on the fence, you don't want to hesitate. Do it. Join us. It's going to be awesome. roadtripdads.com. And we hope to see you in the mountains this fall.
Thank you for listening to the Honestly Adoption Podcast, a resource courtesy of the Honestly Adoption Company. To learn more about us, visit www.honestlyadoption.com.